Hey guys, this is Nick. Welcome to Strange Spotting. Most Bigfoot videos entail one alleged creature caught on camera, but the ones showing two or more individuals are so rare that the adjective exceptional might apply to them. I am drawn to those because they can shed light on Sasquatch behavior or on the astounding level of effort exerted by hoaxers. That's precisely how I feel about the Bigfoot Brothers Stealing Chicken footage, and in this video I will analyze it and try to give you guys a reliable answer on its authenticity. Here's the footage. Of course, the name of this clip comes with a bit of fantasy attached. We don't know if these are brothers, let alone real Sasquatches, but the idea that these could be juvenile siblings collaborating on stealing food gives the clip some pleasant comedic nuances. On a more serious note, this short recording has not received any sort of critical attention that I know of, and when I shared it as a YouTube short, it was almost universally dismissed as a hoax. Granted, skepticism and cryptozoology always go hand in hand, but I was a bit surprised that almost no one would even entertain the possibility that this could be something other than humans wearing costumes. I did not get the same clear-cut impression from it, and therefore I piled it on my to-do list. I gotta say my job will be much easier with this one, because two of the canonical hypotheses, namely the CGI/AI hoax and misidentification, are simply untenable, and I don't think I should use up some of your precious time to explain why that is. These guys are neither apes nor bears, and are not created digitally. As far as I'm concerned, the choice is between humans in a costume or undiscovered hominoid. Now, I noticed someone in past comments saying it's ridiculous of me to assign a significant probability to the anomalistic option, which is the idea of undiscovered creatures. I would like to address this criticism with two counter-arguments. Number one, my idea of science is unbiased observation and testing of a hypothesis. If I were to simply discard one possibility from the get-go, my analysis would lose objectivity. Number two, I have already reached the conclusion in several previous analyses that Sasquatch, dogmen, and proto-pygmies are real extant creatures, and any further analytical effort must take these results into account. I don't need to dismiss my findings for every new video. In this particular case, the extreme clarity of the footage is cause of concern, and I will assign a 70% probability to the costume hypothesis and 30% to the undiscovered hominoid. Okay, so let's try to contextualize this footage. First of all, I tried very hard to find background info on it, but I'm afraid we're once again dealing with an anonymous source. The only reference I stumble upon is that it was apparently recorded somewhere around Vancouver in the British Columbia territory of Canada. Most of you know my attitude by now. I consider info on the source a meaningful part of an investigation, but any lack thereof is by no means a deal breaker. Conflicting info is a sign of forgery. Lack of info is not. To me, what's in the frame can disclose a great amount of information and allow us to determine the plausibility of a purported cryptid sighting. As mentioned earlier, the clarity of the video could be cause of concern, and perhaps also the very short duration. This clip is just shy of 10 seconds. Why did the author stop recording? Well, despite the good video quality, their hand is not steady at all. This instability could be due to the man or woman being agitated. Let's assume for a moment that the author is not complicit in a hoax, and they actually believe that a Sasquatch is stealing livestock on their property. Let's put ourselves in their shoes for a second. Judging by the lighting, I would say this is late afternoon. I imagine this person probably heard noises coming from the chicken coop, and since strange events had already happened, mustered the courage to grab a camera, went out, I started recording. The good definition and depth of field make me think that there is little to no digital zoom here, and that the author was standing fairly close to the point where the first subject appears. Also, the second subject is not clearly visible right away, but the autofocus slightly adjusts around the 4-second mark. It actually seems very plausible that the person recording was scared by how close the first subject was, but didn't immediately realize that there was a second subject behind a tree, also in close proximity. This made them panic and become aware of how dangerous the situation was. They stopped recording to run back into the house. So, the events portrayed in the footage and the author's behavior are consistent with the purported scenario of a Sasquatch sighting. But this doesn't tilt the odds too much. It's still very possible for this to be a well thought out hoax. There is of course another scenario, which is that of a prank played on the property owner, but I think simple logic is enough to discard it. Even though Canada has much more restrictive laws on gun ownership, how would pranksters know for certain that the farmer in question doesn't have a gun or a rifle? Besides, come on, in what universe would two grown men spend money on and wear Bigfoot suits to go steal chicken on someone's property as a prank? It does not make any sense. I know people do stupid things, but the main characteristic of stupid things is unplannedness. Yep, it's a real word. While this would require a great deal of planning. So all we can do now is look at our subjects and try to determine if they're human or not. I will begin with height estimates, and I can do that with both subjects. I use the two trees that are closest and best for each in terms of perspective. Perhaps it's a bit of a cliche given that the footage was allegedly recorded in Canada, but the leaves up here look a lot like those of maples. Maple trees typically have a trunk diameter ranging from 1 to 2 feet at maturity. I'm going to be conservative and consider that the trees we use are between 1 and 1.5 feet, which is also my impression with the naked eye. A quick note, I used small segments of different colors to signify the fraction because subject 1 is 5.2 times the first tree trunk's diameter, and subject 2 is 5.6 times the second tree trunk's diameter. Here are the results when considering 4 possible lengths, specifically 12, 14, 16 and 18 inches. Subject 1 has a height ranging from 5.2 to 7.8 feet, equivalent to a range from 158 to 238 centimeters, and Subject 2's height is within a range of 5.6 to 8.4 feet, or 171 to 256 centimeters. I've already been conservative in considering the tree trunks being no more than 1.5 feet in diameter, so I think it's safe to assume the real height of the subjects is somewhere between the second and the third bracket. Therefore, subject 1 is between 6.1 and 6.93 feet tall, or between 185 and 211 centimeters, and subject 2 is between 6.53 and 7.47 feet tall, or 199 to 228 centimeters. How do these results affect our analysis? Well, they don't eliminate the possibility of a hoax, they just shave off a tiny bit. I couldn't find the equivalent chart for Canada, but just for visual reference, this height distribution chart for US citizens shows that in order to execute this hoax, the person behind it would have had to find 2 individuals whose height fall in the right tail of the chart that represents 1% or less than the population. Possible, just a bit less likely in probabilistic terms. Now let's look at the ratios. I've selected a frame where the visible arm is parallel to the torso, head and legs in order to reduce the margin of error. Here are the bars aligned and resized together to maintain the proportions, and here are the ratios calculated automatically. I was a bit surprised by these results. First of all, there are noticeable differences compared to typical human ratios, but there are also differences where compared to the ratios calculated for other Bigfoot video evidence in the past. The most peculiar aspect here is how big the head is compared to everything else. It took me a moment, but then it hit me. Body ratios change throughout human development, with babies and prepubescents having heads bigger than adults in proportion. So, is it possible that we're looking at Sasquatch kids here, the equivalent maybe of human kids younger than 10? And the ensuing question, since most Bigfoot sightings report heights around 6-7 feet tall, is it possible that the majority of sightings involve Sasquatch kids, or juveniles, as is often said of non-human species? Speculation aside, the key takeaway here is that these subjects possess, anatomically speaking, non-human proportions, and this fact, in concert with the previous observations, ulteriorly tilts our probabilities in favor of the undiscovered hominoid hypothesis. I would like to address some physical details now. Since we're trying to establish if what we're looking at are costumes or not, I'm going to take a real Bigfoot costume that has been used recently for a commercial and, ingeniously or not, presented as possible evidence by quite a few in the paranormal community. I am confident many of you, if not most of you, have come across this clip recently. Here's a photo subsequently shared online to put any speculation to rest. The reason why I include this in the analysis is that since this is very recent, we can assume this is pretty much how gorilla or Bigfoot costumes look nowadays and compare it to our subjects, at least to the one in the foreground. The costume from the commercial doesn't even compare in terms of realism. It is very bulky, whereas the subject's frame is quite thin and defined. This means the hair should have been glued to the skin, or that this is not a costume. Besides, the hair looks very scruffy and unkempt, while the costume used for the commercial is very clean and neatly combed, which is typical of fake hair made of artificial fabric. Last but not least, look at how light reflects on the costume, making it almost shiny. The subject's hair does not reflect light, it seems to almost absorb it, which corroborates the idea that this is real body hair, conducive to camouflage in a natural environment. Allow me to repeat it. These three discernible qualities, taken together, indicate that this is not a costume, but real hair, and therefore raise the probability of this being an undiscovered hominoid. Now let's look at how the subject deambulates. I've put this bright red line for a visual point of reference to show you something. The subject does not move up and down while walking. In this particular case, I would not call this walking, but perhaps slow running. The only reason why it moves compared to the line is due to the irregular terrain, but the body always stays in the same position, with a hunched forward torso and the head ulteriorly hunched forward in relation to the torso. I've already spoken at length about this in one of my videos, the Lake Sisladopsis Bigfoot video analysis, where I concluded with eliminating any possibilities of that subject being a human. Here's the graphic representation I assembled in that occasion, and that always comes in handy. The typical Sasquatch posture was more pronounced in that video because the creature was running much faster, but all the hallmarks are present in the video under scrutiny. The only difference I see are the arms being a bit less extended, but that is due to the fact that the subject here is going slower, so he does not need to balance as much, and that it is holding a chicken. Now look at how the leg extends in this isolated frame. The foot is now fully visible, but the toes are still in contact with the ground, and the only way for this to be possible is that the subject must have a metatarsal break in the middle of the foot. This position alone shows how the subject has clearly observable non-human walking/running mechanics. This latest finding is the last nail in the coffin of the costume hypothesis. As far as I'm concerned, The analysis is already over and with an incontrovertible result, but I would still like you to take notice of these last two details. Subject number 2 is swinging from left to right instead of staying still, and I've heard of this behavior in countless podcast interviews of eyewitnesses. Plus, there is this sound at the end, which I'm fairly confident is a call to other members of the clan to warn them of a human presence. I've never heard this kind of sound in a hoax. To sum it all up, along this analysis, we have observed no sign of forgery whatsoever, but all the following elements that corroborate the plausibility of this video: the author's behavior consistency, Subject 1 and 2's great height, Subject 1 non-human body ratios, frame thinness incompatible with a costume, hair's unkemptness incompatible with artificial fabric, hair's opaqueness incompatible with artificial fabric, non-human running mechanics, Subject 2 swinging consistent with eyewitness reports, and the vocalization. In conclusion, I rate the Bigfoot Brothers Stealing Chicken as incontrovertible evidence and the present analysis proof of the existence of an undiscovered hominoid inhabiting the forests of North America. Also, it is a piece of video evidence highly underestimated by the paranormal community, completely ignored by the scientific community, and due to the visual clarity and proximity to the camera, a piece of evidence on par or perhaps even superior to the Patterson-Gimlin footage. I suspect this video may hold more important details, and I look forward to dedicating more time and effort into its further examination. If you like this video and would like to see the aforementioned Lake Sislodopsis analysis, all you have to do is click here. Thank you all for watching, and I will see you in the next one.